Hi everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome to another episode of this. Thank you as always for being here. So, last week we did Monster Mash, and this week we did Monster Mash movies. This week we're doing Monster Mash books. To recap, and I really want to make sure I drive this home because I had a very hard time with the book aspect of this little part. What I'm trying to deliver to you are stories that are not very human centered. They're very monster centered. I wanted stories that had more than one kind of monster interacting with each other. Found a whole bunch of movies on it. Not a whole lot of books, especially since I'm mostly a horror fan. There are not a lot of horror books that deal with monsters just kind of dealing with each other. And that makes sense if you think about it, because in order for it to be horrific and in the horror genre, you kind of need victims, and that's where humans come in handy. So if we don't have a lot of humans, if we don't have a lot of that victim point of view, it's not really going to be scary. So the majority of these books they're either kind of grudgingly let into the horror genre, or they're like fantasy horror, sci-fi horror. There's just not a lot of books here, you guys, and I'm really sorry, but I want to make sure I give you some. I will say you can find the Monster Mash theme more in horror short stories. So please buy anthologies, buy collections, because you're going to get more kind of out of the box storytelling with those. I know, like, in particular, Clive Barker, if you read his books of blood, you're going to get more of the monster-centric storytelling. Not a lot, but you get more of that in short stories. So if you really want that, short stories are the way to go. Short stories are, like, my favorite anyway, so I'm always going to tell you, please buy anthologies and collections. But to get started today, this first book, it was released by a horror publisher. I think you can still find it. The publisher shut down, unfortunately. But this book is, the main character is a demon. And it's from his point of view. And he's a demon trying to break into the stand-up comedy world. And it's a weird book, but it is very funny. It's a delightful, very short read. It's not a short story. It is book, but it isn't long. And it's called Demon with a Comb Over by Stuart R. West. And again, these will all be written out below in the video description, so please check them out. This is a weird book, but it's funny, and there's not a lot of human point of view. You know, humans are secondary in this kind of storytelling. The next I want to talk about, this one sometimes gets labeled as horror, and it's one of those things I have trouble with this because horror can have so many subgenres that I don't know. I wouldn't consider this a horror book. Other people do, so what the hell do I know? It's The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean. And this book is told from the point of view of a human, but the majority of the characters are not human. It's complicated, but it is a book, worth your time. I have to tell you, and I'm not proud of this, I'm not happy about this, Neil Gaiman's work is usually not my preferred flavor. I get why he's so popular. I completely understand why. It's not like it's beyond me. It's just kind of not my thing, so I'm not going to hate on him. But this is a good book. This was a good read. This wasn't a book where I was like, this is a waste of my time. I enjoyed reading it, so I, of course, recommend it. That's why it's going on here. The next series, this is a series. We're going to have some series in this. The next is a series. It's called Prosperos War. Now, the individual books are called something else, but they're by Jaye Wells. She's, like, kind of famous. She is one of those, USA Today bestseller novelists. Now, unlike some of the other series I want to talk about, Prosperos War... See, I have trouble with this one because I had trouble with witches in particular, because I got lots of witch books, but witches seem to be more like humans with a little extra something. They're not, and we'll get back to this whole witch thing in just a second. They're not necessarily not human, though. Do you know what I mean? They've got a little something extra to them, but they're still mostly human, mostly mortal-ish. So I had trouble with this one, but this one seems to be just superhuman enough where all the characters are not necessarily, they don't try to live, especially behind closed doors, a very human life. These are very gritty books. They're not lighthearted. They don't try for the comedy break in some of the heaviness like some of these other series do. It's very, there's a big whiff of noir to these stories. And I think they're very good. I've read 3 of the books. I honestly don't know how far we are. I could have looked this up and I didn't. I'm really sorry. But I really like these books. They're not short. You know, these are not short reads. And they're kind of dense and they're kind of heavy, both in atmosphere and emotion. But they're really good stories. Definitely recommend Prosperos War by Jaye Wells. The next book I want to talk about, and I'm going to throw this one in there because the last 2 are definitely series, and this is the bulk of this video is going to be these 2 series. This book is one that I helped co-write, Slaves to Gravity, written by Wesley, Southard, and Summer Canon. This is not a human story. There are no human characters in this story. I'm spoiling something for you there, but that's the truth. This is a monster book. It is a sci-fi monster book, and it is told from the points of view of things that are not human. And I think you'll like it. You know, a lot of people do like it because it does tend to, again, I spoiled it a little bit, but it's okay. You will still enjoy reading it because it is a great book. And I'm not just saying that because I helped write it. I think Wes had a really great idea, and I think we had a really good time kind of going with it and making it. It's a total recommend, of course. But yes, please check it out. Now, these last 2 I want to talk about are series, and they're both long series. They are 13 books each. And the first is the Southern Vampire Mystery Series. You would know these as the books on which the HBO show True Blood is based. I talked about that last week. No. These books are mostly concerning non-human characters, but there are a lot of human characters in it. But what makes it interesting is the main character. We get, all of these books are told from the first person point of view, Sookie Stackhouse, and these are her observations. This is her living her life. She herself is not totally human, so she doesn't necessarily fit into the human world, but she is mostly human, so she doesn't necessarily fit into the supernatural world. And there's all kinds of soups in these books, and these books are, first of all, they're hilarious. There is such old school slapstick comedy in these books. I think you would be surprised. I was thinking about this when I was getting ready. There's a scene where a massive kind of vampire brawl has broken out, and Sookie, who is very much not, she doesn't have supernatural strength. She is very much breakable by these extremely strong, violent creatures. A vampire corners her, and you know, they're very Halloween-y about it. They put their claws like this and they're like, ah! And she has kind of a low-cut dress on, and she goes, look, and flashes the vampire, and it distracts the vampire long enough for her to kick him in the balls and run for it. There's all kinds of things like that. Like, again, Sookie's not super naturally strong or anything, but she does manage to kill quite a lot of vampires in these books. But it's all through stupid, bumbling, accidental, clumsy luck. It's amazing. And I can't stress the humor enough. These are very lighthearted, despite the fact that these are also fantastically violent books. Very violent books, but also hilarious. I think one of the things that has me so attached to these stories is 2 very small events could have played out differently in my life, and I would have been living a life very similar to Sookie Stackhouse. I am very familiar with the people in that town. I'm very familiar with those attitudes and just so many things. And it just reminds me of my home, my upbringing, and I'm very well aware two very small events could have played out differently in my life, and that would have been me. Aside from the supernatural beings and having all of these vampires, falling in love with me, that would never be me. But I've read this whole series, again, 13 books, 4 times now. I will say that I don't love the way the series ended, but it must be pointed out that Alan Ball, who ran the show True Blood, by the time the series of books ended, the show was already well on its way. It was not new. It had been going on for a while. She wrote a lot of these books just ahead of the show. And it also should be pointed out, Alan Ball kind of fucked her over at one point. If you're at all familiar with the story, at one point in her books, Charlaine Harris actually killed off the character of Bill Compton. He died. And at a press junket or something, Alan Ball announced to the press that she had killed off the character of Bill Compton in her book. And I think by this time, the show and the books had diverged. They were no longer following the same storyline, and that happens fairly early. And I don't know why he did that, because she had to go back through and not do that. She had to not kill Bill Compton. But I think it's also, this show got to be so big, and there was so much cultural support for it behind the scenes. She got very sick of the story. She got very sick of Bon Temps. She got very sick of the characters. And the way she ends the story, it's kind of obvious that she's very done with it, which is sad, because as a reader, you get very attached to the story. You get very attached to some of the characters. And some of those characters were done dirty, in my opinion. It's not going to stop me from recommending the series. It's not going to stop me from picking it up and reading it when I need a pick-me-up. I don't love the way it ended. Now, the next and last series I want to talk about is a series called The Hollows by Kim Harrison. Now, I was just talking about how I had a hard time with witches in this, because witches are just people with a little something extra. Not in this. The main character is a witch, but she is not at all human. Her mortality doesn't follow the same timeline a human mortality travels, if that makes sense. She would live much longer. And this story, pick a supernatural creature, and they're in this. Vampires, pixies, fairies, elves. There are elves in this, but not Tolkien elves, Keebler elves maybe? Business suits and nefarious little assholes, kind of. This series has a little less humor than the Charlaine Harris series. And also a little less violence. It's not as violent. There's fighting and stuff, but it's not... the Charlaine Harris gets really gory and bloody sometimes in the Sookie Stackhouse books. In The Hollows, there's a lot of lore attached. These are supernatural beings who, especially the witches, who the memory of where they came from and who they are is lost to them. And they do exist. They do coexist with humans in this. And things have transpired to make this happen. Like in the Sookie Stackhouse books, there is the vampires coming out of the coffin, where they announce, we exist, we can come out now because we have this fake blood, that, we don't have to eat you anymore, here we are. In this one, it's a little more cataclysmic, the way the supernatural world is brought to light for the humans. And, I don't want to ruin it too much, but in the aftermath, all humans are convinced that tomatoes are poisonous and they will die if they eat any sort of tomato product. So the tomato product business is kind of an underground black market. Only the supernaturals will eat tomato products. They don't hurt anybody. It was a rumor. And the main character she befriends a human police officer, a detective, and she introduces him to tomato products, and he gets addicted, and it becomes a running gag throughout the series, where every time she knows she's going to see him or he comes to her house to talk to her about stuff, she gives him this contraband like salsa or pasta salad or barbecue sauce. He loves it. It's just one of those things. There's a lot of strange lore. There's a lot of details that make these books really interesting. So the witches in this, again, not human, not at all. The male witches, they're a race. First of all, the witches are a race of beings. And the male witches have the way a male witch and a female witch would have sex. For fun and procreation, they do both. It doesn't involve, it's not a purely physical act. The pleasure aspect is done through magic and mental manipulation. It's not so much physical, which is a good thing because the male witches are not well endowed. They've got teeny weenies. And so, of course, in order to procreate, that has to be physical. So the pleasure comes from a different aspect, but to procreate, there definitely has to be that, okay? So the not well endowed, ridiculously so, the not well endowed male witches, while inside the female witches have sort of it's like an inner jaw, a toothless jaw that will clamp down to keep it there so that insemination can occur, okay? And when witches will have sex with other beings that have more normal sized genitalia, it can be painful if they don't exit quickly, if that makes sense. It's just one of those things. There's a lot of strange details like that where you wouldn't think of it, but it makes sense, and it makes the whole story, the whole world more colorful, more interesting because of those strange details. And I really like this series. It's another one, again, 13 books is a long series, and endings are hard no matter what. Endings are hard. I didn't hate the way it ended, but I didn't love it either. I want to spoil it or not? It's a little spoilery. It's the super duper happy ending. Super duper happy ending. So everything that could possibly be happy is happy in this ending. Which is okay, but it's a little corny, I guess. And I didn't hate it. And so because I was so disappointed with the way the Southern Vampire Mystery series ended, because it doesn't have a super happy ending, it has a sort of pessimistically hopeful ending, I guess. But one main character gets fucked over big time, and I'm still mad about it, to be honest. But in the Hollows books, it's just so happy. It's so happy. And it's just a little I wanted that for the Sookie books, but I got it for these books, and it was almost unnecessary because these overall weren't quite as brutal as the Sookie books. The Sookie books get very brutal. But I love The Hollows by Kim Harrison. God, I'm so sorry. I keep having to look at this list. By Kim Harrison. 13 books each. I mean, these are time commitments. Not so much with the Southern Vampire Mystery books. The Sookie books, they're not exactly long books. They're not novellas. They're longer, but they're short reads. And it also helps that they're light and funny in between all of the heads falling off and stuff. So that'll be it for me. Can you think of any horror books that are not really about the people? If you can, feel free to put it in the comments, recommend it to me. I'm open for it. I have no idea what I'm going to do next week. I'll think of something. To be perfectly honest, once we get into ghost territory and haunted houses and gothic, it's going to be a few weeks to get through ghosts. So I may start it next week. I may want to wait another week just so I can be better prepared. Just show up and we'll see what I come up with. But thank you, as always, for being here. I got a new phone, so hopefully this fucking clicker will cooperate a little better with it. So Okay, let's see. This is me signing off. This is the clicker back to raise my blood pressure. So thank you for being here, and I hope everything is going well with you. I hope the world is treating you nicely. And that's it for me. Bye!